Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are recording live. Working from home today because for so many reasons, and we'll talk about that soon. I have been thinking about this podcast for a while. I think I let you guys know that I was reading the Elizabeth Gilbert All the Way to the River, and I've been listening to it, it's really good. I love the way Liz Gilbert writes, and I love the way she tells a story, and it's really beautiful. One of the things she's talking about, though, is having a love and sex addiction and joining a 12-step treatment to rectify that challenge. But it had me thinking about a lot of things, right? And love and sex addiction is actually a real thing. And it really does tie into codependency. She talks about codependency in the book. And she has her own definition, which is awesome. But it really had me thinking about this idea of how we teach people how to treat us. And when we are really focused on relationship and, love and sex addiction, which we'll talk about, we are teaching it. Our goal is to teach people how to love us, right? How to love us in the way that we are not loving ourselves. And so as I'm listening to this book and I'm, on my workout and doing things, I was really thinking about how one of the things she said is no therapist ever said to her that she had love and sex addiction. And I have thought about that, right? I have not said it in those words as a therapist to clients because I don't know that I would identify it that way. It's not a diagnosis necessarily. It is in terms of addictive behavior. And I do treat addictions, but that's not how I would characterize it necessarily. And then I started thinking about my own life and my own choices. I don't know if I shared with you guys. I was at a celebration of life for a very, very close family member. And I absolutely love and adore this human that is now in the spirit realm. But we were having conversations and I said out loud, I have an oxytocin addiction. And people stopped and kind of looked and I was like, oxytocin, it's a chemical in your brain, not Oxycontin or whatever. And so giggle, it was really funny. But I have been saying for a while that I am a recovering oxytocin addict because I recognize that one of the reasons that I used love and sex as an addictive, substance wasn't love and sex necessarily, but it was oxytocin. It was that hormone, that pair bonding hormone that lives in our brain, and it helps us to bond with another human. And so you get it in a lot of ways. And I think I've shared with you in the past, part of bonding with a newborn baby is that in childbirth and certainly in, breastfeeding and spending time with babies in general, they, release this pheromone that then releases oxytocin in our brain. And I love oxytocin. But one of the best ways to get it is just smelling the top of a baby's head, their feet. Babies in general just release a pheromone that releases the oxytocin for parents to bond with this tiny screaming creature that, needs to be fed and changed and sleep so that it grows. And it's a really beautiful kind of structure in the human brain and body for us to be able to connect with our babies. Now, another way to get it is through physical touch, both with humans and then also with our pets. Again, when we have that connection, we do release oxytocin, which then makes us, want to engage in it more. When we first connect with someone, however we meet them in that kind of love romantic way, spending time with someone and certainly physical touch to whatever degree, holding hands or, when someone's flirting and they touch your arm or whatever, any kind of physical touch can release oxytocin, any kind of positive physical touch. And so I recognized pretty early on that I really liked oxytocin. And I didn't know what it was right at the time. I was like, oh, there's a release. But as I studied the brain more, and as I studied, human interaction and watched human behavior, blah, 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 I did recognize that that's one of the things that kept me engaged in unhelpful coping skills to whatever degree for much of my life. And, I would talk to other people about, like, there's a line in a Pink song that says, I just love love. I'm not a slut, I just love love is actually the Pink reference. It's in a Pink song. But I did acknowledge that part of my addictive behavior was really enjoying meeting someone new, that engagement in our brain, and then engaging in physical touch to whatever degree. And I was aware of my oxytocin dependency. And I've been a recovering addict. I've been celibate for the last almost 3 years. And I do not engage in that particular release of oxytocin. There's a study or something that, and don't quote me, right? Look it up yourself. But that we need at least 8 hugs to just maintain, a certain level of health. And I can imagine that there's lots of humans out there that are not getting that level of oxytocin release or physical, connection. And what I know to be true is certainly there are people in relationships that are not getting that level of maintenance in relationship, which is part of why people feel disconnected. Certainly in romantic relationships, a lot of times we are not getting that physical touch in a way that we want. What I know to be true is that I have a lot of clients who are introverts and they feel really drained at the end of a day. And part of that is because their children are touching them constantly. And, we know that kids rely on and require a level of physical touch. And so if you did not grow up in, an affectionate household, you did not get that same amount of physical touch and connection with your, parents and family of origin. I know a lot of people who did not grow up with a lot of affection in their family of origin. I fortunately did, and I'm super grateful. And then as, I have a lot of siblings, little kids, very touchy humans, but it is also draining for some people. And I have said in the past, I'm not really a hugger. You have to be really close to me, or like, there's got to be a reason. When I greet my friends or whatever, like obviously we hug them. I do have a couple friends who are kissy humans, and they'll, kiss my cheek. I got COVID that way one time at a social gathering. You know who you are. But really recognizing that, like, for the most part, it's not my go-to to be physically affectionate. I don't even shake hands all that often. Occasionally I will, even when meeting a new client, because they're a stranger, I'm a stranger. Like, that's not, for me, appropriate. And then certainly with COVID, and I actually stopped shaking hands during the swine flu epidemic because it was, that was one of the ways that it was transmitted. But I started thinking about this idea of love and sex addiction and teaching people how to treat us, and really acknowledging that there have been relationships that I've been in, and certainly as I talk with clients in relationship, right, romantic or otherwise, that how we engage with them is an indication of, one, how we would like to be treated, but also a reflection of how they see us, right? And really thinking about this idea. And so Liz Gilbert does a great job of like telling these stories, but it was helpful to me to recognize that a lot of times when we go into relationship, we are hoping, with that best intentions, the things we do for love, which is the name of my book. The reason I called it that is really because we are doing all of these things, right? physical or otherwise, to receive acceptance, validation, and love. And so when we show up in the ways that we are naturally oriented to do, what our hope is that someone will acknowledge or recognize how we show up and how we love them, and then they will give that back. It's rare that it happens in that, equal measure reciprocity way. There's, the book of the love languages. I acknowledge that it's problematic based on the man who wrote it, and I cannot think of his name right now. Chapman, I think. But really acknowledging that, he was onto something in terms of really recognizing how we express love and then also how we receive love. So I do recommend it, right, when I'm working with couples in terms of them increasing awareness of how they are showing up in the relationship and then what their expectation is for someone else to show up for them. And really acknowledging that, physical touch may not be a go-to for a lot of people, because they weren't raised that way, right? Like I said, my mom would hold our hands, and there was a lot of hugging. My siblings are very touchy humans, even now, and certainly with their kids. I do remember, riding for the long time, in the back seat, if I was riding with babies, or in the front seat, my mom would hold our hands, if we were driving, or if, we were going through something rough. She did a fantastic job of really showing us that physical affection. And that is, for me, an important thing with close relationships, right? With further out, kind of, we talk about the concentric circles of closeness in relationship. The further out in a circle, the less likely I am to be huggy. It's just not my go-to. And part of that is an energetic boundary for me, right? I don't like to have everybody in my energetic boundary because I can absorb and really connect with their emotional experience that way. And so I don't like to be touched. That's also true for, introverts in general, is that it does require a certain level of connection and openness and intimacy to be physically connective with another person. Now, as we talk about sex and love addiction, really acknowledging that, whenever we are intimately close with another person, there is an exchange of energy. There is an exchange of emotionality. There is an exchange of so many things without getting too graphic here, but recognizing that releases oxytocin, right? It releases that pair bonding hormone where I want to spend more time with you doing this intimate activity, right? Even if it's not sexy, right? Sex specifically. But I just want to spend more time with you, more time in your space, more time making eye contact, which is another way of releasing oxytocin, more time intellectually engaging with someone. All of those new engagement activities that we spend when we are connecting with someone is how we are building connection, right? And then how we are teaching people what our experience is, right? And when we've been in a relationship for a long time, that does get stale, for lack of a better word. It's okay, here's the same thing. Once I know a lot of the parts of you, who you are, what you like, what your team is, all the things, it doesn't release the same amount of endorphin. So it really does take effort to continue to maintain a healthy connection. And a lot of times people like that rush, right? That super high endorphinic, oh my God, I'm so excited. And all I talk about is this person and I just want to spend more time with them, blah, blah, blah. That fades. It's supposed to. But when you are maybe unaware that you are addicted to that kind of falling in love phase, a lot of times when things get more, consistent and routine, perhaps we're not engaging in physical affection as often. Perhaps we're not engaging in those intellectual conversations that we really enjoy. Perhaps we're not spending as much time and effort as we did at the beginning. And so that oxytocin and the endorphins in general kind of fall away, right? And then we start to go, oh, I have to see you for who you are, flaws and all the things. And then it takes a little bit more effort. It takes a little bit more consistent engagement and time and energy to like, okay, tell me how your day was. Now we're raising people. We're getting those things, but we're not getting it to the level that we were. And if we're not making people yet, right, it falls away. It kind of gets stale or just routine. And a lot of times people will then start to seek it out somewhere else, right? And I'm not talking about cheating necessarily. What I'm talking about is like, it just got boring and then we start to look for something else. Or depending on our attachment style, I really like it at the beginning. Towards the like real talk, let's, learn who I am as a human, I pull away. My avoidant attachment style is like, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with this, so maybe I'll just like not. I'll keep my options open or whatever it is, right? But we are starting to teach people what our routines are, who we are as humans, and how we engage. And as we do that, we're starting to see their stuff. They're starting to see ours, right? And that shine of oxytocin and certainly those other endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, all the things, it starts to fall away. And we start to see the real human for who they are and what they do. Perhaps, they chew with their mouth open. Perhaps they, don't put the cart back. Perhaps there are lots of things that start to lose or, come into the foreground of like, oh, I see who you are. They stop holding the door open, right? They stop texting back. They stop, asking questions about like, how's your dog or whatever. They start to show their real selves, if you will. I've talked a lot about the representative. Chris Rock had a whole skit about how when we first start dating, we show them our representative, all those bright and shiny parts that we perhaps aspire to be, but maybe don't maintain on a regular basis. And once that oxytocin kind of wears away, once that kind of shiny bit kind of, that cardboard cutout, like, then you see the real person, you're like, oh, this is who you really are. And so most people will either stay engaged or just not look at it, right? We're just like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to that. They have so much potential, so I'll stay in this. And then what happens is then we start to build resentment because we're not communicating as much, because we're not engaged in the same level of, excitement and whatever it is. And so that resentment starts to build and that frustration starts to build. And then I start to see who you really are. And I don't necessarily like that as much. And so, yeah, I might have to stay in it for reasons like we talked about, making choices from fear, or I may pull away and shut down. That is my go-to move. I tend to pull away and shut down. Coffee. And I might stay in it, right? I might keep showing up and doing the things that I have typically done, but I may do them with a little bit of resentment. I may do them with a little bit of frustration. And part of that frustration and resentment comes from you're not showing up in the same way that I'm showing up in this relationship, right? But as we stay in dynamics without communicating, without, expressing our needs, without kind of showing what it is that we want to receive in a relationship, is we don't say it out loud, right? We just have it in our mind. I do all of these things for you. I expect that you will do all of these things for me. When you don't, then I'm just going to be frustrated with you, right? I'm just going to be a little bit angry, a little bit resenty, but I am showing up in all of these ways to show you how to love me without saying words. And as it often happens, right? We'll stay in things for much longer than we need to, and we keep engaging, or then we keep just moving, right? Leapfrogging from one relationship to another. A lot of times when I am working with people who are, early in a breakup or maybe haven't dated in a while, and they look at their ex and they go, well, they're already moved on. Part of that is that they need that oxytocin fix. Part of that is that it's really difficult and challenging to be in a relationship with yourself in your own head. That's why I tell you, clean up your head. That's important. But it's really difficult to do that. So I'm just going to move on to the next person who can validate and make me feel all of those bright and shiny endorphins, and I'm just going to keep it pushing, right? A lot of times people will move on from one relationship to the next without doing the work of acknowledging, how did I show up in the relationship? What did I miss? What was I doing that, contributed to this not working out? A lot of times we'll just be like, well, they were whatever. They were insecure. They were blah, blah, blah. And all of that is possible and true. But the other part is I did not see the flags at the time. And so when people disappoint us, or we are disappointed, a lot of times we'll just like chalk it up to they suck and I'm going to find another one. It's very possible that that's true, but it's also very possible that my endorphins run out. I stopped getting those oxytocin hits of validation and acceptance from that other person. And that's the part where a lot of times, like, people, when I talk to them about codependency, they presume that codependency is being dependent on another person. That's not true, right? It's actually our dependence on being needed, our dependence on being loved, our dependence on that acceptance and validation. Yes, from another person, but not just one, from all. Right? And if we don't give that to ourselves, if we do not manage our own resources in terms of our time, our space, our energy, our sex, then we're just running around kind of, giving it to everyone and then feeling resentful and frustrated and bugged. And then we move on to the next person hoping that, like, this will make it better, right? This new relationship will make it better. Let me, have some people and they'll make it better. And that's not healthy, obviously, but it's also not helpful, right? If we are not managing our resources, our boundaries, if we are not managing them well, we're going to continue repeating those cycles, not just the cycles from when we were kids in our family of origin, but in relationship, one after the other. And a lot of times, without even recognizing it, we are perpetuating unhelpful coping skills like oxytocin addiction, and hoping that people are going to show up and do it differently, but we're not going to tell them, which is unhelpful, right? That's not the best way to engage in a relationship. But also, let me just caveat here, running into a relationship and being like, hey, here's all my trauma. You want some of this? Like, that's also not helpful. Really finding that balance of learning how to engage in a measured way and checking yourself on a regular basis. Years and years ago, I had a friend, and she was kind of in this long-term exit plan from her ex at the time. And occasionally they would get together and hook up, right? And I was like, it's really a bad idea to do that. And, they were like, well, it's fine. It's harmless. Like, we're not going to get back together. I was like, except that you're releasing enough oxytocin to stay in it. And so then they get shiny again. They get like, oh, well, I could probably look past these certain things. And then, it takes a few days, if not weeks, to go back to like, oh, they're still the same. Yeah, they were the same the whole time. So are you. But when we have those kind of off and on situations, or those situationships, we stay longer because we have those hits of oxytocin, and then we're like, this is fine. Or in my case, sometimes there were lots of sources of oxytocin. I used to use it as an energy source. I used to use those oxytocin releases as a way to get through, whatever was going on at the time, because it was just a hit enough to be like, cool, I've got enough energy. I'm going to keep doing things. I was not necessarily addicted to the person, but I knew that I was addicted to the oxytocin. It's a great endorphin. It really does a beautiful number of things that perpetuate our existence on the planet. but it is incredibly harmful if we don't acknowledge and recognize what our motivation is for doing it, right? And that is kind of the crux of the addiction. 1, the oxytocin. 2, the acceptance, validation, and love. 3, really recognizing I want somebody to love me, right? Just me as a human, but also just us, right, in the world. And I'm going to show up in all of these ways that I think I know how to get it, right? I'm going to show up as my best representative, do all the things, make the food, be thoughtful, all the ways that I show up in relationship, and hope that in modeling it for them, they will show up in the same way. And when they don't, because I miss the flags, then I am frustrated and resentful. I am also thinking, I am hard to love. I am not good at this. Whatever it is, those, negative thoughts that we hold on to are. It keeps us stuck in cycles. And if we're not staying in relationship, kind of expecting a different result, what we then do is just move on from one relationship to the other, showing up as ourselves, and then expecting the other person to figure it out. We are not puzzle boxes. Yes, we are complicated and nuanced and, really amazing creatures, but it's helpful to recognize, looking back and recognizing our patterns, and then also acknowledging, how am I taking care of myself? How am I showing up in this way? Am I showing up empty, hoping somebody else will fill me up? That there's so many myths about finding your other half or your soulmate or your person or whatever. And that's great. I'm past the rom-com phase of my life. As I've told you, I am lifetime.com, whereas my accountability buddy is hallmark.com. I am showing up as my own love of my life. I am showing up in ways that I can give myself those things, so I'm not seeking it out from a deprivation place, but from I would love to reflect somebody to reflect what it is that I show up as, the way that I love. But I'm paying attention now because I'm not, doped up on oxytocin. Any hoops. There's your nugget. I am recording a video. I will be putting it on YouTube, but I'm still working on figuring out how to edit things. There's been so much going on in life that I love recording and I love sharing these things with you because they're thoughts and things that are happening in my head. And I do acknowledge that there are people out there that are also going through these things, that it's helpful for us to start to even just to evaluate ourselves differently and look at, okay, what are my patterns? What have I done in the past? How would I like to change that to make it different? I continue to make content because I recognize that there's value in it. And as I've been told by other people are listening. They are. They're acknowledging and they're, kind of integrating these teachings or these conversations into their awareness. That's all I've ever wanted from this. And so I continue to make content. That's just how I function. Both in my office, working with clients, but also just sharing it with you. We've had some new countries listen, which I'm so grateful. Countries all over the world that are picking this up and listening to it, and it continues to grow. And so I'm humbled and grateful often. Hopefully you'll get something from this that you maybe needed to hear. My book is Best Intentions, The Things We Do for Love. I'm thinking about doing a giveaway at the 1-year anniversary, which I think is October 22nd. But check out my socials for that. Follow along on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. You know how to get a hold of me. It's lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com. And if you guys want to hear something specific, if you have questions, reach out to me there. You can reach out to me on all my socials. And thank you for everyone who's listening and continuing to engage. I am super grateful. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.